You are holding that garden hose right now, aren't you? Standing at the end of the row, spraying your tomato plants down at the end of a hot day, feeling like you did right by them. Stop. That hose in your hand is doing more damage than the drought you're trying to fix. I mean that plainly. The way most folks water a tomato is the single fastest way to rot the fruit, split the skins, and invite every disease in the county onto the leaves. And here is the part that will sting a little. It costs you nothing to fix, not $1. My people have grown tomatoes this way for over 100 years in the same Lancaster County soil without a single moisture meter or drip kit or bag of special calcium powder. We never needed them. And that is exactly why nobody ever told you the truth. There is no money in telling a man that the thing already sitting in his shed will grow a better tomato than the $40 gadget on the shelf. Stay with me, because around the middle of this, I am going to show you a trick with something you can buy for less than the price of a cup of coffee. Something my grandfather kept buried right next to his tomato roots that will water your plants slow and deep for days while you do nothing at all. Before we go on, do me one favor. Drop your growing zone or your state down in the comments. Just the state is fine. I want to see where you all are watering from, because the timing changes a great deal from Pennsylvania to Texas, and I will come back and answer as many as I can. I still remember being maybe 8 years old, out in the garden behind our farmhouse before sunup, and my grandfather catching me pouring water right over the top of the plants the way I'd seen done. He didn't scold. He just took the can from my hands, knelt down, and poured it slow right at the base of the stem into the dirt, watching it sink. "You feed the roots, not the leaves," he said. "The leaves can take care of themselves." I did not understand it then. I understand it now. And by the end of this, you will too. Let me tell you about the first mistake, because it is the one nearly everybody makes, and it is the one that feels the most like kindness. You come home from a hot day, the plants look a little wilted, a little sad, so you give them a nice light sprinkle every single evening. A little water often to keep them comfortable. That feels like the loving thing to do. It is the worst thing you can do. Here is why, and I am going to keep this simple, the way it was told to me. A tomato root will only grow toward water. That is its whole job, to hunt for moisture. When you sprinkle a little bit of water on the top of the soil every day, all that water stays up in the top inch or two. It never sinks down deep, so the roots have no reason to go down. They stay up near the surface, shallow, spread out flat like a dinner plate right under the dirt. Now picture that shallow-rooted plant on a 90-degree July afternoon. That top inch of soil dries out in a couple of hours. The roots are all sitting right there in that dry layer, gasping. The plant panics. It wilts hard. So you water again, lightly, and the whole sorry cycle starts over. You have trained your tomato to be weak. You have made it completely dependent on you showing up every single evening with that hose, and the moment you miss a day or go visit the grandchildren for a weekend, the plant collapses. A deep-rooted tomato is a different creature entirely. When you water deep and less often, the water sinks down a foot, 2 feet, and the roots chase it all the way down. Now you have a plant with roots reaching into the cool, moist soil far below the surface, soil that does not dry out in an afternoon. That plant can go 3, 4, 5 days between waterings without so much as a droop. It shrugs off the heat. It shrugs off your weekend trip. The old measure my father used was simple. A tomato plant wants about 1 to 2 inches of water a week, and it wants it all at once or in 2 big drinks, not dribbled out every day. 1 inch of water means soaking the ground until the moisture reaches down about 6 to 8 inches deep. You can check it yourself with nothing more than a finger or an old screwdriver. Push it into the soil. If it slides in easy for 6 inches, you are wet enough. If it stops after 2 inches, you have been watering like most folks water, and your roots are living up top where it is dangerous. Now here is where the outside world finally caught up to what we already knew. The agricultural people at places like the Extension Services have measured this out, and they will tell you a mature tomato plant sends roots down well past 2 feet when it is watered properly, and that same plant watered shallow keeps almost all its roots in the top 6 inches. Same seed, same variety, same summer. The only difference is how the man with the hose behaved. One plant is drought-proof, the other is a beggar. So the first fix costs you nothing. Water deep. Water less often. Soak it good, then walk away and let the soil dry down a bit before the next soak. Your plant gets stronger every time you make it wait. But watering deep only solves half the problem, because there is a second mistake hiding inside the first one, and this one is the reason you keep getting those ugly black bottoms on your tomatoes. Let me show you that next, because the industry has built an entire shelf at the garden store around getting this one wrong. You have seen it. You wait all summer for that first big beefsteak, and you turn it over, and the whole bottom is caved in, and black, and leathery, rotten, ruined. That is called blossom end rot, and I would bet money that if you walked into any big box garden center right now and described it to the fellow in the vest, he would walk you straight over to a bottle of calcium spray or a bag of calcium supplement and tell you your soil is short on calcium. And you would buy it. Of course you would. It sounds right. The rot is a calcium problem. That part is true. But here is what they are not telling you, and here is where somebody is making a good living off your worry. 9 times out of 10, your soil already has plenty of calcium in it. Especially here in the East, our soils are full of it. The calcium is right there in the dirt. The problem is not that the calcium is missing. The problem is that the plant cannot drink it up. And do you want to know what carries calcium from the soil up into the fruit? Water, steady, even water. Calcium can only travel through the plant dissolved in water, moving up through the roots like a bucket brigade. When your watering is a roller coaster, bone dry for 3 days, then flooded, then bone dry again, that bucket brigade keeps breaking down. The calcium never makes it up to the far end of the fruit, the blossom end, the part farthest from the stem. So that tip starves and turns black. It was never about how much calcium was in your soil. It was about whether there was steady water to carry it. Think about what that means. All those bottles of calcium spray, all those special tomato fertilizers with extra calcium, all that money, and for most folks, the calcium was never the problem at all. The water was... You could pour a whole jug of calcium into ground that swings from dry to drowned and still get rotten bottoms because the delivery truck was broken, not the warehouse. The extension research backs this plainly. Study after study from the land-grant universities points to inconsistent soil moisture as the leading cause of blossom end rot, not a true shortage of calcium in the ground. Uneven watering is the culprit, and the fix, once again, is free. It is consistency. Water deep, on a steady rhythm, and keep that soil from swinging between flood and drought, and the calcium already sitting in your dirt will ride right up into the fruit the way it is supposed to. We never had a single bottle of calcium anything in our garden shed. Not one. My grandmother would have laughed at the idea of buying calcium in a bottle when the whole valley was built on limestone. What we had instead was a rhythm. We watered the same way, on the same schedule, and we protected the moisture in the ground so it stayed even. That evenness is the whole secret to a clean, perfect tomato bottom, and there is a nearly free way to lock that evenness in, which I will get to, because it is the thing that changed my whole garden. But first you have to know when to water, because you can water deep and you can water steady and still throw half of it away to the sun and invite disease onto your plants if you do it at the wrong hour. And the wrong hour is the exact hour most working folks do it. Evening, after supper, when it has finally cooled off and it feels pleasant to be out in the garden, that is when most people water, and I understand why. It is comfortable, but it is costing your plants. Here is the trouble with watering at night. When you water in the evening, especially if any of that water splashes up onto the leaves, that moisture sits on the foliage all night long. It does not dry. The air is cool and still and damp, and those wet leaves stay wet for 8, 10, 12 hours in the dark, and a wet tomato leaf in the dark is a bed made up special for every fungus there is: early blight, late blight, septoria, leaf spot. That gray fuzz, all of them need one thing to take hold and spread. They need the leaf to stay wet. You are handing them exactly what they want, all night, every night. The right time is early morning, just after sunup, before the heat comes on. My grandfather had us out there at first light, and I used to grumble about it as a boy, but he was right, and now the science says the very same thing. When you water in the early morning, 2 good things happen. First, the plant drinks deep and fills itself up before the brutal heat of the day arrives, so it goes into the hot hours strong and full instead of thirsty. Second, if any water does get on the leaves, the morning sun comes up and dries them off within the hour. No long wet night, no bed made up for disease, and there is a money side to this too. Water in the evening, and you would think you lose the least to evaporation, but the real waste is the disease that costs you the whole crop. Water at midday, and you lose a good portion of it straight to the air before the roots ever get a sip. Morning is the thrifty hour. The water goes down into the ground where it belongs, and almost none of it is wasted, and your leaves stay dry and healthy. Nothing thrown away. My people do not like to waste what the good Lord provides, and watering at the wrong hour is waste, plain and simple. Now, if you cannot get out there in the morning, if your knees or your schedule keep you inside at dawn, here is the workaround, and it matters. Water in the morning if you possibly can. If you truly cannot, then water in the late afternoon, early enough that the leaves have a few hours of sun left to dry off before dark. And whenever you water, keep it low. Keep that water down at the base of the plant, in the soil, off the leaves entirely. Which brings me to the single most important rule about where the water goes. And it is the very rule my grandfather taught me with that watering can when I was 8 years old. You feed the roots, not the leaves. The leaves do not drink. I know that sounds too simple, but so many folks water like they are, giving the plant a shower, spraying the whole thing down top to bottom. The plant does not drink through its leaves. It drinks through its roots, down in the soil. Every drop that lands on a leaf is a drop that did not reach a root, and worse, it is a drop that is now sitting there inviting blight. So get that water down low, pour it at the base, let it soak into the ground right over the root zone. Keep the foliage bone dry if you can help it. This one change, watering low and in the morning instead of high and at night, will do more to keep your plants green and disease-free than any fungicide you can buy. And once again, it is free. It is not a product, it is a habit. The industry cannot sell you a habit, which is exactly why nobody in a store is ever going to lean over and tell you this. Now, I know what some of you are thinking right about now. This all sounds fine for somebody starting a fresh garden bed, somebody planting new this spring. But what about the rest of you? The ones who already have big established plants out there right now, already staked up, already loaded with fruit, plants you cannot exactly dig up and start over with? I have not forgotten you. In fact, what I am about to tell you might be the most useful thing in this whole talk, because you can walk outside this very weekend and do it to plants that are already in the ground, and you will see the difference within days. That rhythm is the whole thing, and I have spent a long while writing down every rhythm my people kept, because a video only holds so much before a man loses the thread. Everything I am handing you here for free about deep water and steady moisture, I put into 3 books of mine in the full form, with the feeding schedule laid out zone by zone, the cutoff date for nitrogen where you live, how to read a sick plant like a doctor reads a chart, how to pick ripe produce so nothing rots in your kitchen, how to bring roses back from your kitchen scraps, and how to run the ants and roaches off your property with borax and vinegar from under your own sink instead of paying a fellow with a truck. Over 300 pages of it, written plain, the way it was handed to me. If you want the whole system in your hands instead of one piece at a time, scan the QR code right there on your screen, link in the description, pinned comment, and the books are yours. But the free part still stands, and there is one more free thing I owe you before we part. Here is the situation you are in. You have established plants. Maybe you have been watering them a little wrong all season. The roots may be shallower than you would like. You cannot fix the roots overnight, but you can change the ground they are living in starting today, and the ground is where the whole battle is won or lost. The answer is mulch, and I want to be very specific about this because most folks either skip it or do it wrong. A good thick layer of mulch laid down over the soil around your tomato plants is the closest thing there is to a free insurance policy for everything I have talked about. Let me tell you exactly what it does. That layer of mulch is like a lid on a pot. It stops the sun and the wind from stealing the moisture out of your soil. Bare dirt on a hot, windy day dries out from the top down shockingly fast, and that is what causes those wild swings between wet and dry, the very swings that give you blossom, end rot, and cracked fruit. Lay down mulch, and the soil underneath stays evenly moist for days longer. It smooths out the roller coaster. It gives you that steady, even moisture that carries the calcium up into the fruit, without you having to be perfect about your watering. The mulch forgives your mistakes. The extension folks have measured this out too, and a good organic mulch layer can cut the water lost from your soil by a very large margin, so much that many gardeners find they only need to water half as often once they mulch properly. half as often. And here is the part that matters for those of you with knees that ache and hoses that feel heavier every year. Less watering is not just less work, it is a better tomato. The steadiness does the work for you. So this weekend, here is your job. Get yourself some mulch. Straw is wonderful, the real straw, not hay with all its seeds. Shredded leaves you save from the fall are free and perfect. Grass clippings dried out a bit work fine. Even a few layers of plain cardboard or newspaper with something over the top. Lay it down around each plant, a good 2 to 3 inches thick, out to about a foot in every direction from the stem. Leave a little gap of an inch or two right around the stem itself so it does not stay soggy against the plant. That is it. You have just given every established tomato in your garden a moisture blanket, and you have done it with material you likely already had lying around your property for free. There is a second thing you established garden folks can do this weekend, and it pairs with the mulch. Build yourself a little basin. Take your hoe or your hands and pull the soil up into a low ring, a shallow wall, in a circle about a foot out from each plant, like the rim of a shallow bowl with the plant in the center. Now, when you water, you pour it into that basin, and instead of running off sideways across the ground and away, the water is held right there over the roots and forced to soak straight down deep where you want it. My father built these basins around every plant, and we called them water wells. They are older than any irrigation kit, and they cost nothing but 10 minutes and a little sweat. Mulch on top to hold the moisture in, a basin below to send the water deep. Do those two things to your established plants this weekend, and you will have solved most of the watering problem without a single dollar and without disturbing a single root. But there is one more thing, and this is the one I have been promising you. The one my grandfather kept buried right down in the soil next to his roots. This is the old trick that the outside world forgot and the plain people never did. I want you to picture a simple clay pot, not a fancy glazed one. A plain, unglazed terracotta pot, the reddish-brown kind, rough to the touch, the cheapest kind there is. Now, picture it buried right down in the soil between your tomato plants, up to its neck, with just the very top rim showing above the ground, and a lid or a flat rock set over the mouth. You fill it with water, and you walk away. And that pot, all on its own, waters your tomatoes slow and deep and perfectly, even for days. This is called an olla. It is one of the oldest watering methods known to man, going back thousands of years, used in the deserts of the old world and by peoples across the dry country, long before anybody dreamed of a drip system. And it is so simple it will make you a little angry that nobody told you sooner. Here is how it works, and the beauty of it is in the clay itself. That unglazed terracotta is not fully sealed, it is porous. It is full of millions of tiny openings too small for your eye to see. When you fill the buried pot with water, the water slowly seeps through those tiny pores in the clay wall and out into the surrounding soil. But, and here is the wonder of it, it only seeps out as fast as the soil is dry. When the soil around the pot is dry, it pulls the water out through the clay. When the soil is already moist, the water stays put in the pot. The dry soil literally draws the water out through the pot wall on demand, and the wet soil holds it back. Do you understand what that means? It means the pot waters your plant exactly as much as it needs, exactly when it needs it, and never a drop more. It is the perfect, steady, even moisture that we have been talking about this entire time. No roller coaster, no flood, no drought, no wet leaves, because all the water is delivered underground, straight to the roots, where the disease cannot reach it. It is everything the good watering habit gives you, except the pot does it for you day and night, whether you are home or not. And the water savings are the part that will stop you cold, because the water goes directly into the soil underground and never sits on top to evaporate and never runs off. An olla delivers water with almost none of it wasted. The research and the field trials on this method have found water savings as high as 70% compared to watering the ordinary way over the top of the ground. 70%. Think of that in a dry summer. Think of it on a water bill. Think of it for those of you out west where every drop is dear. My grandfather did not know the number 70%. He just knew that in a dry August, the plants nearest the buried pots were the ones that never suffered, while the rest of the garden begged for the hose. Now, let me tell you exactly how to do this, because it is a weekend job and it is cheap. Get yourself an unglazed terracotta pot, the plain clay kind, A pot about the size of a gallon jug, 6 or 8 inches across, will water the plants around it just fine. Here is the one thing you must handle. Most clay pots have a drainage hole in the bottom. You need to plug that hole because you want the water to seep out the sides slowly, not gush out the bottom. A flat stone set over it works, or a dab of waterproof plug, or even a good cork. Some folks take 2 pots and seal them mouth to mouth, but for a beginner, 1 pot with the bottom hole plugged is plenty. Dig a hole and bury that pot in the soil right between your tomato plants, up to its neck, leaving just an inch or 2 of the rim above the ground so no dirt washes in. If you are placing them fresh, 1 pot serves the 2 or 3 plants right around it, so set them about every 3 feet down the row. Fill it up with water from your hose or your can, and set a rock or a saucer or a lid over the open top. That lid matters for 2 reasons. It keeps the water from evaporating off the top, and it keeps the mosquitoes from finding it. Then you simply check it every few days and top it off when it runs low. In the hottest part of summer, that might be every 3 or 4 days. In milder weather, once a week. That is the entire chore. 1 buried pot, a little water poured in, a lid on top, and your tomatoes drink steady and deep and even for days while you sit on the porch. For those of you with established plants already in the ground who cannot dig near the roots without harm, you can still do this. Bury the pot a little further out at the edge of the root zone, going gently, and the roots will find their way toward that steady moisture over the coming weeks. Or if you would rather not dig at all, there is a cousin to this trick that is even simpler. Take an old plastic milk jug or a large juice bottle. Poke 4 or 5 tiny pinholes in the bottom and the lower sides with a needle. Bury it just a few inches into the soil next to the plant, fill it with water, and put the cap on loose. It will seep out slow through those pinholes, the same idea as the clay pot, using something you were about to throw in the trash. It will not last as many years as good clay, but it costs you nothing at all, and it works on the very same principle. Slow, deep, even, underground. Now think for a moment about what we have really been talking about here. The garden store will sell you a drip irrigation kit with timers and tubing and emitters and connectors for a good deal of money, and it will clog and it will crack in the frost, and you will be back next spring buying parts. They will sell you self-watering planters and moisture meters and calcium sprays and special tomato food, and I am not telling you every one of those things is worthless. I am telling you that the core of the thing, the actual job of getting steady, deep, even water to the roots of a tomato plant, was solved thousands of years ago with a clay pot that cost a couple of dollars, and it was solved so well that 70% less water does a better job than your hose. That is the part that ought to make you think. It is not that the modern products do not work. It is that you never needed them in the first place to grow a tomato that would make your neighbors jealous. An entire industry has grown up around selling you the solution to a problem that a buried clay pot and a handful of mulch quietly solved before your great-grandparents were born. There is a great deal of money in keeping a man from knowing that the answer already existed and cost almost nothing. There is no money at all in a fellow like me telling you the truth for free. My people kept these ways not because we were clever, but because we never stopped using them. While the outside world was busy inventing new things to sell, we just kept burying the clay pot, kept laying the straw, kept watering at first light down at the roots, the way it was handed to us. We did not forget. And now you have it too. It was never lost. It was just quietly set aside where you would not think to look on a shelf, replaced by something with a price tag. So here is what I hope you take from the time we have spent together. You did not learn a bunch of new tricks today. You recovered something that was quietly taken from you, 1 garden store visit at a time, 1 bottle and 1 gadget and 1 kit at a time, until you started to believe that growing a good tomato was complicated and expensive and required a shelf full of products. It never did. The knowledge was always yours by right. It belonged to your grandparents and their grandparents, and it got buried under 100 years of things somebody wanted to sell you. You are the kind of person who would rather do a thing the honest, simple way than keep paying for what the good earth and a little know-how already provide. That is not being cheap. That is being wise. That is the stewardship my grandfather lived by, and I suspect it is why you watched all the way to the end of this. So do this for me. Go back up to the comments and tell me your state or your growing zone the way I asked you at the start, because I truly do want to see where you all are gardening from, and the timing of all this shifts with your climate. And while you are there, tell me one more thing. Tell me whether you have ever fought with blossom end rot, those black bottom tomatoes, and whether you had been buying calcium for it. I read these and I answer what I can, and it helps me know what to talk about next. Do not just think it. Type it out and leave it, even one word, because this only becomes a real conversation if you speak up. And if you would like to keep recovering these old, plain ways, the ones that were handed down and never should have been forgotten, come along with us. This is not about supporting a channel. It is about a group of folks who have decided they are done overpaying for what nature already gives free, and who would rather learn the way things were done before all the selling started. That is who gathers here. Next time, I am going to show you the one thing my grandmother buried in the bottom of every planting hole before she ever set a tomato in the ground, a free handful of something most people throw straight in the garbage that fed those plants all season long and grew fruit so heavy the stakes could barely hold them. It is sitting in your kitchen right now, and I will show you exactly how much to use and how deep to bury it. I will see you there. Now, this video showed you the mistake and the shape of the fix. But inside my membership, the Amish Field Circle, I walk you slowly through the whole 100-year Lancaster deep watering method the way my grandfather taught me. And when something puzzles you, ask me right there, and I answer you myself. You're never doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen. Cancel anytime. Come join me. Now that your watering is fixed, there's more that could be quietly hurting your plants. Let me show you 5 simple mistakes the Amish never make so your tomatoes finally thrive. It's starting right here.